compiled in the Newstalk Radio Newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The Public Accounts Committee has again reminded permanent secretaries and accounting officers to stop overpaying contractors. In the region, former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Sir James Mitchell, died today after a period of prolonged illness. He was 90 years old. And internationally, Director of International Red Cross supports countries to assist Afghanistan's poor who are suffering from a man-made crisis. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on Newstalk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The Public Accounts Committee, PAC, has again stated that government agencies making payments to ensure contractors are not overpaid are a frequent occurrence in agencies. Chairman of the PAC, German Figuera, reminded that accounting officers of government agencies are to follow the advice of the Financial Secretary.
An advice from the Public Accounts Committee, PS, and this is an advice we have decided to give accounting officers coming before us, particularly with the issues of overpayment and the backlog keep reflecting itself in year after year's reports. And the Finance Secretary actually would have given us this advice. When you would have discovered these happenings that keep reflecting itself year after year, this is 2016, this is 5 years ago. The advice from the Public Accounts Committee is that you write the FS, explaining to him your efforts in getting the contractor to satisfy his obligation has failed, and you're asking for the FS to give consideration to write it off.
The PSC reminded officers as the committee was considering and questioned the overpayment of some $15 million to a contractor for construction works at the Kaituma Hospital in 2011. Opposition PAC member Ganesh Mahipal urged the accounting officers of the Health Ministry and other agencies to check works before payments.
We are seeing large sums of monies being paid to contractors, and I will just like to state for the record purpose that it comes back to measuring the work and then issuing the payments. And I think that is a sore issue that we have found in this 2016 Auditor General's report. And I trust that the accounting officer will take note, as we would have guided all other accounting officers, that the engineering department and the technical officers need to play a greater role in ensuring that we pay for measured works.
The PAC heard that in several instances, files for contractors for which there were overpayments are missing and have to be reconstructed. Permanent Secretary Malcolm Watkins, responding to a question from a government PAC member, Dharam Kumar Siraj.
Mr. Chairman, 499, there's an issue of overpayment here. I note the PS response, but my direct question is that if in the research that was being done, if the contractor was notified of the overpayment and asked to repay the amount.
This position on this query remains the same as the last sit-in. We were unable to find any information pertaining to this project. to date. So we would ask to continue to search to see what we can find on this query.
The ministry's accounting officers were urged to work with the national administration and tell the board to locate the files to ensure the debts are written off through a process to be initiated by the financial secretary or recover sums through legal proceedings. The Auditor General reports recorded for every agency instances of overpayment to contractors. The Health Ministry says it has assisted scores of Venezuelan nationals occupying an area in Anabishi, Port Kaituma, who are suffering from chronic malnutrition and waterborne diseases. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says health officials rushed to the area after reports of chronic malnutrition and severe diseases plaguing the migrants.
What we found generally in the camp is that it's very unhygienic because you have a lot of people living together. The team estimate that there are 198 persons living in very close proximity, and they're from 25 different families. Because of the unhygienic conditions, they're using the same water from the river, and they're using the river to wash and do other things there. So the water is not of good quality.
The health minister says a large number of children among the group who are sickened by waterborne diseases were assessed by the medical team.
At the time, while the reports were that there was severe malnutrition, what we found was that some of the children were chronically malnourished. I'm not too sure whether they have had prior medical attention, like things like vaccination and so forth. We also discovered that some of the children, they had severe skin rashes. Some of them had like upper respiratory infections, and quite a few of them had diarrheal diseases.
He says the team further discovered on a Sunday that a number of adults were also sick.
We also, on Sunday, the team also saw 42 adults, and again, we saw similar types of illnesses among the adults, in addition to which we were able to detect among the group some cases of malaria. And again, they were given treatment based on the medical conditions that they had.
The health minister says the more than 15 families of Venezuelan migrants present no immediate threats but are living under deplorable conditions.
Well, where these persons are located, maybe about 5 minutes away, you probably have some persons, Guyanese, who are living there. So they have actually gone and settled in an uninhabited area. And so I don't think they're directly affecting anybody within that area. I think their challenge is how to maybe access food, maybe get some jobs. We were told that some of them would go to Port Kaituma to look for jobs. So they're trying to make a living.
Dr. Anthony says the ministry is monitoring the migrants medically and the Civil Defense Commission is assisting with essential items. The Ministry of Health has recommended the formula for persons requiring COVID vaccine boosters. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony, during Monday's COVID update, stipulated how the ministry will administer the boosters.
If you got 2 doses of Pfizer, then we're recommending that if you're doing a booster, that you get a Pfizer as your booster. If you had Moderna and Moderna, you can either do another Moderna as your booster, but right now we don't have that. But there's nothing wrong if you want to get a Pfizer. as your booster. If you took a Johnson & Johnson vaccine, then after 52 days after, you can get a booster. With Sinopharm, if you had 2 doses of Sinopharm, then your booster should be a Sinopharm vaccine taken 3 to 6 months after your second dose.
The health minister says healthcare workers, persons over 18 years old with comorbidities, and those of 50 years and older are entitled to get the boosters. Dr. Anthony further outlined the formula for the other vaccines used in Guyana.
If you did AstraZeneca, so you had 2 doses of AstraZeneca, then your third dose, you can either opt to get AstraZeneca again, or you can use an mRNA vaccine, which would be Pfizer. So 6 months after your second dose of AstraZeneca, you can get mRNA or a Pfizer vaccine to complement your AstraZeneca. If you took Sputnik V and you completed both doses, then you can take a J&J vaccine, and that would complement the series. So you can use the J&J as a booster.
The ministry began administering the booster doses as of Monday, November the 22nd, 2021. The Health Ministry is reporting steady decline in positive COVID-19 cases. In the last 24 hours, the ministry says it recorded 31 new positive cases and a sharp decline in ICU cases to 9 cases. There are 77 people in the hospital. The data shows 1,729 other persons who tested positive told to isolate themselves at home. The ministry recorded 1 COVID death today, which takes the toll to 977. The ministry says as of Sunday, November the 22nd, 396,042 or 77.2% of adults are partially COVID vaccinated in Guyana, with 269,791 or 52.6% who are fully vaccinated. The ministry says there are 19,905 or 27% of children ages 12 to 17 years old fully vaccinated and 28,709 or 39.4% partially vaccinated. Now for the news in the region. Former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Sir James Mitchell, died today after a period of prolonged illness. He was 90 years old. Eyewitness News reports that his death was confirmed by his daughter, Louise Mitchell. He had been suffering from a series of complications and had been recently taken to Barbados for advanced medical treatment. The New Democratic Party, which he founded in 1975, said today that it was saddened that one of the founding fathers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has passed. He served as his country's second prime minister from 1984 to 2000, as well as premier to St. Vincent and the Grenadines from 1972 to 1974. Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves remembered the former PM of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Sir James led our country as Prime Minister for 16 years, from 1984 to 2000. And prior to that, he was the Premier of our country between 1972 and 1974. He was a regionalist of extraordinary conviction and merit, and he played important roles in the shaping of the OECS and of CARICOM, and indeed even before that of CARIFTA. we remember Sir James. We will have other opportunity to speak fully about his extraordinary career.
The NDP says that during his service, he had steered the country towards economic stability and improving housing across the islands. Sir James had served as its president until 2000. Demonstrations have been planned for the day on which Barbados is scheduled to transition to a republic. Barbados Today reports that this is because of an invitation extended from the government of Barbados to Prince Charles to attend the festivities as the guest of honor. He is to accept the prestigious Order of Freedom Independence Award. The planned protests have received the endorsement of an international relations specialist at the University of the West Indies, as well as an outspoken government backbench parliamentarian. In an interview with Barbados Today, General Secretary of the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration, David Denny, declared the inclusion of Prince Charles an insult to the Barbadian people. This, he says, is because of the role of the British monarchy in the proliferation of slavery and oppression in Barbados. He says if Barbados is breaking with the monarchy, then a representative should not be part of the process to become a republic. Trinidad and Tobago's Minister of Health, Terence Dial Singh, says that his country is in the midst of a third wave of COVID-19 infections. Speaking at the Ministry of Health's COVID-19 media briefing, Dial Singh explained that epidemiologists have deemed the rising COVID infections and deaths as a third wave of the pandemic since the rolling 7-day average of cases is now over 500 plus. The Twin Island nation experienced its first wave of COVID-19 infections in August to September 2020, followed by a second wave in June to July 2021. Yesterday, the country recorded 10 additional deaths and 404 new COVID cases. This took the active cases to 8,695, with hospitalizations at a record high of 539 patients seeking care. Dial Singh says his ministry will be coordinating the role that the 5 emergency operations centers will play in the deployment of resources and personnel as the demand for treatment increases. Dial Singh said herd immunity currently stood at around 45% and called on persons to make sure they took steps to protect children under 12 years who cannot access vaccines. Dial Singh again encouraged citizens aged 12 and over to get vaccinated. And lastly, in the region, Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown is adamant that the offer of a compassionate settlement of 50% payable in cash, lands and bonds to severed Liat workers is non-negotiable. He says union representatives have 2 choices, either accept or reject it. The declaration follows a push by chairman of the Leeward Islands Airline Pilots Association, LIALPA, Captain Patterson Thompson, for a meeting with the Antiguan government to clarify concerns relating to the various offers that have been placed on the table for severance. LIALPA wants the Antigua and Barbuda government to pay $60 million in cash, but Mr. Brown says his government cannot afford it. He also disclosed that during a meeting with LIALPA, he indicated his willingness to pay 50% of the full staff liabilities. However, the cabinet decided against his recommendation and capped it at 50% of the severance. Captain Thompson said if the union does not get a favorable response to its request for a meeting, LIALPA will present what it has to its membership and ask each individual to make their own decision. Here now is your international news from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Chris Barrow with the BBC News. President Biden has ordered the release of 50 million barrels of oil from the United States Strategic Reserve. The move is intended to lower the energy costs of US consumers. Jonathan Josephs has the details.
This is an unusual move to try and lower oil prices. They've risen about 60% this year because supply has failed to keep up with demand that has surged as the global economy recovers from the effects of the pandemic. The White House says despite the strength of the US economy, consumers are suffering from higher prices when filling up their cars and heating their homes. Businesses are also seeing higher costs. That's true in other countries too, and explains why China, India, Japan, South Korea and Britain are also taking part in a move that will be seen as putting pressure on the OPEC group of oil-producing countries to increase supplies.
There have been further falls in the value of the Turkish lira on what traders in Istanbul are now calling Black Tuesday. It follows comments from President Erdogan in support of last week's cut in interest rates. Theo Leggett has this report.
The Turkish lira has lost some 40% of its value against the US dollar since the start of the year, while inflation is running very high. Despite widespread calls from economists for interest rates to be pushed up to protect the currency and keep prices under control, President Erdogan has put pressure on the central bank to do the exact opposite. He believes that lower rates will boost investment and promote exports. The policy was described by a former deputy governor of the bank as an irrational experiment.
46 people have died when a tourist bus crashed and burst into flames on a Bulgarian motorway. The passengers were all from North Macedonia, returning from a weekend in Turkey. 12 of the victims are children. Visiting the site, the Interior Minister spoke of bodies clustered inside and burnt to ash. Only 7 passengers escaped from the bus that caught fire after tearing away a section of the crash barrier. A former Iranian prison official has testified for the first time at his trial in Sweden. 60-year-old Hamid Nouri is accused of handing out death sentences during a purge of dissidents. Here's Mike Thompson.
The charges against Hamid Nouri stem from the time in 1988 when he was allegedly assistant to the deputy prosecutor of a prison near Tehran. Nouri, who was arrested at Stockholm Airport in late 2019 under Sweden's principle of universal jurisdiction, has rejected the charges as lies. Rights groups say about 5,000 prisoners were killed across Iran, allegedly in reprisal for attacks carried out by an opposition group, the Mujahideen of Iran, or MEK. This is the first time any Iranian official has gone on trial for the purge.
This is the World News from the BBC. The authorities in Burkina Faso say 9 members of the military and at least 10 civilians have been killed in an attack in the northern city of Fubei. Last week, around 50 soldiers died during another raid in the north. Anger is growing in Burkina Faso over the extremist violence that's killed thousands and displaced more than 1 million people since 2017. There have been protests and calls for President Roch Kabore to resign. Police on the French island of Martinique say they and firefighters came under gunfire from protesters overnight, demonstrating against strict COVID measures imposed by Paris. The French Interior Minister said live ammunition was also used against police on the neighbouring island of Guadeloupe. France sent special forces to beef up security on its overseas territories after more than 80 shops and businesses were looted on Sunday. The Nigerian government has dismissed the report by a judicial panel of inquiry that found soldiers and police had shot dead peaceful protesters in the city of Lagos last year. Ishaq Khalid reports from Abuja.
The Nigerian Information Minister says the report of the inquiry is fake and unreliable. Lai Mohammed also faulted the use of the term massacre in the report to describe killing of protesters by the security forces at the Lekki toll gate in Lagos. But he says elsewhere across the country, 57 civilians, 37 policemen and 6 soldiers were killed during the EndSARS protests in October last year. He did not say who was responsible for the deaths.
The United Nations says its appeal for $600 million to support Afghanistan during the winter is now fully funded. The UN says the country is on the brink of catastrophe, with more than half of the Afghan population at risk of going hungry in the coming months. The main donors are the United States, European countries, and Japan. And that's the latest. BBC News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of your highlights. The Public Accounts Committee has again reminded permanent secretaries and accounting officers to stop overpaying contractors. In the region, former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Sir James Mitchell, died today after a period of prolonged illness. He was 90 years old. And internationally, Director of International Red Cross supports countries to assist Afghanistan's poor who are suffering from a man-made crisis. And that was your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.